Hey there, and welcome back. This is Steve with Refined Nature of Santa Fe. You ready to pour another one? We are. Watch how we transform this absolute disaster and turn it into something totally delightful. Stay tuned. So we started off by putting some hot glue on the back end of our olive wood pieces. Then we positioned and mounted them to our HDPE molds that we construct ourselves. A lot of people use crossbars or clamps and stuff like that to hold their wood down, and that's fine, but we like to captivate our audience on Instagram and here on YouTube with some beautiful pours, and those things just kind of get in the way and they muddy up the waters. I mean, you're going to plane both sides of the board anyways. What's wrong with planing off the hot glue? For this board, we stepped out of our comfort zone a little and went with a color that a lot of people had been requesting us to use, and it wasn't a normal color, natural color that we always like, and it's fluorescent green. We were so happy to use this color, and we saw how gorgeous it came out, and we were like, why did we never use this? But we did, and you're gonna see just how beautiful everything came out. We grabbed some handy dandy mica powders from Upstart Epoxy, and of course Upstart Epoxy. For this pour, we used the deep pour product, which requires a 2-to-1 ratio. We decided to dump some black in there as well, just to give it a little bit of contrast, so that the green wasn't so loud. And look how gorgeous these two colors go together. I mean, they really complement each other well. We stirred it up as usual. That's always a good thing to do. Deep pour epoxy is super active, so the more you swirl it as it cures, the better the finished product's gonna look. Then we went ahead and hit it with our clear coat, let it cure for a couple of days, and it was time to demold it. Always remember when you're demolding, whatever you're going to use as your pry tool, to insert it between wood and the mold. So you want to get the pry tool right on the underside, like of this piece of wood here where I'm going to do it, and the resin mold. So I've tried to insert the pry tool in between epoxy before, and I ended up cracking it, or I ended up chipping it, and I've never had any issues when it's properly inserted between the wood and the mold. So that's just kind of a little small pro tip for you guys. These projects take enough time as it is. We don't want to be adding any more steps to the process, if you know what I mean. So we popped this one out of the mold. We went ahead and looked it over. Everything was good. We had a couple of high points, which we sanded off with the belt sander. And we got to planing. We've planed both sides. Remember, both front and back have to be nice and flat and level. Got all that glue from the underside off, and it looked pretty. We started with 80 grit and worked our way all the way up to 220 grit just to get it ready for the flood coat. And now it's time for the flood coat. Everything looked good. Everything went off without a hitch. And it's time to pour in our liquid gold. Remember, flood coats are always tabletop epoxy and a 1-to-1 ratio. So we poured in our measurement, got it all stirred up, and it was time for that reveal. And look how beautiful this piece came out. The black and the green really complemented each other well, and neither one overpowered the other one. We didn't swirl as much this time. We kind of wanted to let a little bit of the natural swirls take place on their own as the epoxy cures. We didn't want it to look like a squiggly coloring book done by a 3-year-old. So we let it cure up. Then we took it outside to get off all the underside drips from the epoxy. And that's when the heartbreak occurred. We were bringing it inside, dropped it on a flat tile floor, and it was tragedy. I must have said every swear word in the book, even made up a few of my own, I think. I don't know, I was unhinged. But I recollected myself, and I got myself together, and I said, you know what? Things happen for a reason. Let's make this bigger and better than what it was originally. So I popped it back in the form, I put the broken pieces on, and I went a little old school. I put some weights on to keep it down. This wasn't going to be an illustrious pour. This wasn't going to be something that we were going to air all over the place. We just wanted to get this functional and back to normal. So we mixed up the same colors that we used the first time, poured in the second color coat, let everything meld together a little bit, and we tried to make sure that the colors lined up the way they were with the old pieces. Then we did a little bit of mixing and a little bit of swirling just to make sure that all the colors melded in nicely. We liked what we saw, and we went ahead and got ready for doing another clear coat. So we got some trusty Tyvek tape to tape along the edges so that we didn't get any leaks. Then we got our nectar of the gods ready to go. This was 2-to-1 as well because we wanted it to cure just like the rest And after about 2 days, it looked like it was ready to pop out of the mold. We went ahead and pulled it out, took it back outside, and it was time to plane it. So we planed both sides again, and we wanted to make sure that everything was flat and clean and crisp. Then we sanded it all the way up to 180 grit. We knew the epoxy would kick in the rest, so we didn't go all the way to 320 for this one. We went ahead though, and we did get the router, and we went over our chamfered edge, that clean, sophisticated, smooth, sharp looking edge, and to make sure it looked as close to the original as possible. After that, we went ahead and got ready for a second flood coat. And here's another little small pro tip that I'll throw out there for you guys. Whenever you're doing a flood coat, if you stir it with a stirring stick as opposed to a drill, your epoxy is going to come out with less bubbles and a lot clearer. So when you do that flood coat, you're going to maximize your visual output for that piece and see if there's any imperfections, any flaws, or anything that maybe you could have fixed. Here's a perfect example of how clean and clear this flood pour is. I like to hand mix for about 5 to 7 minutes, making sure that I'm scraping the sides and hitting the bottom as much as I can to make sure that all that epoxy is coming together. And then of course you're going to go through your natural steps. You're going to make sure that there's good adequate overflow on the edges, and if not, you can do that with a Bondo spreader or this plastic spreader that we're using. Make sure the sides are well coated and make sure that there's sufficient and adequate dripping going on all 4 sides of the piece. Then you can look it over a little bit, admire it, see how it came out. And it's time to take it outside and sand off those bubbles once again with the notorious 40 grit sandpaper. I find that works the best to get these off pretty quick. Then we hit the underside with some walrus oil to preserve the wood. Then we got these rubber feet from a local hardware store. We wanted to place these on the underside to raise the board a little bit and to ensure that there's no slipping and sliding once it's placed over a bathtub. Screwed in our pilot holes on all 4 corners and made sure that we fastened these solid and sturdy. We finished that up, and now it was time for the handles. So the best way to go about putting handles on a board is to find the center point, which we found here. Then we find the center point of the handle itself. I always like to get a Sharpie marker, line up the Sharpie marker with the bottom of the handles, put a dot there, and then I like to go in with my pilot hole. Then I'll get a drill bit that's a little bit bigger than the pilot hole, but that the screws for the handles will slide through easily with no problems or no obstruction. So then what we do is we mount the screws on from the underneath the board and we screw them into the slots given on the handles. And folks, there she is, bigger and badder than the first piece. We couldn't be more happy with this piece, and we had been noticing a lot of people doing bath boards. So we said, you know what? This was the perfect opportunity to try one, and we did it, and we think that we pulled it off. If you like these videos and you want to see more, please hit that subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. And if you want to be reminded of any time that we're going to have new and improved videos like this, hit that notification bell. Once again, this is Steve with Refined Nature, and we'll see you next time.